This book, Why I Am Not a Hindu, well established publishers refuse to publish this. Now, this is a best selling book in the country, and it has undergone several reprints. It has raised quite a lot of debate. It has caused me quite a lot of problems. Right-wing forces targeted me for writing this book. Well, today we are discussing this book, Why I Am Not a Hindu, which I wrote in 1996. It was first published in 1996 by a very small publisher from Kolkata, as many well-established publishers refused to publish this. Now, this is a best selling book in the country, and it is now published by Sage, an international company, in collaboration with Samya, which it was published in the 1996. And it has undergone several reprints. It has raised quite a lot of debate. It has caused me quite a lot of problems, because the right-wing forces targeted me for writing this book on several counts. But at the same time, this book has given me a new life, because before this book I wrote just one book on the state and the civil rights question, which was my own publication, which has not become very popular in that sense. But later on, I went on writing several books, including Post-Hindu India, which was taken to the Supreme Court by the Arya Vaishya associations of Andhra Pradesh and Telangana to ban that book. But the Supreme Court rejected to ban it and said this author has a right to express his opinion, and if people don't like that book, they need not read it, that's all. But others, those who want to read books, cannot be stopped. Now, I wrote Why I Am Not a Hindu in a context of the RSS, BJP, Vishwa Hindu Parishad demolishing Babri Masjid. And in order to do that, they started mobilizing across the country people of all castes, and they were calling all castes as Hindu, and their agenda, of course, is to show the Muslim minorities their place in India. Now, at that time, I was teaching in Osmania University. Of course, I studied in Osmania and then started teaching in that university in the Department of Political Science. from 1978 onwards. Now, Osmania also had a number of student organizations, the main being the radical left student organization called Progressive Democratic Students Union, and the opponent of that was the ABVP, Akhila Bharatiya Vidyarthi Parishad, that was established by RSS and as their student wing. Now, I, as a young teacher coming from the lower caste called Kurmas, who were historically shepherds in a very remote forest-based village called Papayapet in Warangal district, and having studied in Telugu medium till my grade 11th and then shifting to English medium, and then trying to understand India and the world, the villages. As a civil rights activist, I have toured the entire Telangana and Andhra Pradesh, very deep rural structures, and studied people's hunger, atrocities, starvation, and did quite a lot of feeding work in a very, very bad situation of hunger and deaths in districts like Mahbubnagar, where there was a lot of drought in 80s and early 90s. So with this background, when I was teaching in a university, at that time there were hardly any lower caste rural teachers. Mainly the faculty was drawn either from the Brahmins or from the Reddys, who were historically landed people in this region. And the mobilization of RSS BJP of the lower caste for their agenda of Hindutva, defining all these castes as Hindu, and they were celebrating all kinds of things, huge tilaks on their forehead and threads, saffron threads across their wrists, and then saffron flags all over Osmania campus and all over the country. Became a very normal, visible situation. And every day one procession or other, and then activities were going on. There were hardly any academic activities, either the student wing or the organized RSS wings or other wings were taking up. Now what struck me was that as a shepherd community born and grown person, as a boy, and then as a student, as a sheep rearing child in my early days, and cattle rearing child, and even through education I was into my family occupational production. So I was thinking that when they call even all of us as Hindu, what is common between the Brahmins who were essentially running that organization across the country? And I did quite a bit of study of the RSS origins and its growth and so on. So it was an organization essentially formed by the Maharashtra Brahmins, who were known as Saraswata Brahmins, who were thinking that they are the most superior section within the Brahmins also. They started this organization, and then the whole Hindu system that they were describing, and what I have seen around the temples, in the fields, in the markets, and in the educational centers, I hardly find any commonality between the productive communities, be it the backward classes, be it Dalits, be it Adivasis, and the Brahmins, Banyas, Kayasthas, Khatris, Kshatriyas, what I call the Dvija or upper caste, as I described in this book. Now, what is common between us? Can we also be called Hindu along with the priestly communities or the business communities or the educated, English educated, earlier Sanskrit educated communities that did not allow us that education throughout the history, ever since a famous book called Rig Veda was written? So how is it that we all are being described as Hindu? So then I thought I must write a book with a title, Why I Am Not a Hindu. Now, there was never such a book in India. There was a book in Europe written by a British famous philosopher called Bertrand Russell, Why I Am Not a Christian, but it was not a book. It was a small essay that he wrote, and with other essays, it was with that title small book of collection of his articles. That was only book I have seen. I read that essay, but it has raised altogether different issues of reason and faith in Christianity. But I thought I should make a deeper study of the production, the cattle rearing economy, the agrarian tool making, using of it, tools and irrigation systems, and the castes and communities that produce food, and the castes and communities which are leading these organizations without involving in production, and constructing theories of religions by denying the producers all rights and now clubbing them into that Hindu fold for a political and hegemonic purpose. Now, the problem with Muslims is a different question. Muslim rulers ruled this country. They also did not teach the Shudras, the Dalits, the Adivasis, their Persian language, or little bit of Urdu here and there, but even during their rule, the caste system was not abolished, nor did they write any significant book completely disapproving the human untouchability for all the Dalits or the Shudra exclusion from the domain of God or Allah, what they call. They have never written anything, and I did not come across any such book. And in a region where the Muslims Raja, the Muslim Nizam ruled for a long time, I was brought up and grown, there were positive and negative aspects of the Muslim rule, no doubt. And there were problems between the castes that were in the agrarian sector and the Muslim landlords. But this kind of a religious agenda that these forces were deploying on the nation surprised me. So then I thought that I must go back to start with my village, to make a serious study of each caste knowledge, productive tools, instruments, the way they use them, and how they suffer in the nature, and how they were kept illiterate, and how the Hindu religion that they were constructing around the idea of Ram temple was telling about the religious ideology. So I toured again quite consciously, villages, towns, looked at markets, looked at spiritual systems, temples, the village temples, the established mountain temples, and read as much literature as possible of Brahminic history, and also what I call the unwritten history of the Shudras, the Dalits, the Adivasis, what I call in this book Dalit Bahujan as one word. So I thought, I should write a book from childhood to death, how there is absolutely no human relationship between Brahmin Banyas on the one side, who are leading and controlling the universities, the temple systems, the market, and the food producers and the animal economists in the villages. But at that time, the communist movement did not give us any methodological tools to study religions this way. I was associated with them. I was with the civil liberties. And since the communist movement was also headed by Brahmin intellectuals, even the Congress was controlled and headed and run by the Brahmin Banya Dvija intellectuals. There were hardly any books that were written on my communities. But there were moments, and just then we were introduced with a great struggle to Mahatma Phule's writings, who was the first Shudra, and then Ambedkar's writings, and some kind of collected writings of Periyar Ramaswamy Nayakar. So I thought, Mahatma Phule wrote Gulamgiri with a very creative mind, and Ambedkar wrote Annihilation of Caste with a brilliant academic, scholarly approach, as he was a Western educated man. Whereas I thought, I should write a book entirely from people's life, people's memory, people's civilization, which is as yet unwritten. So I wrote this book with altogether new methodology. The methodology is that people's life is seen as history, and I have defined many concepts. For example, at that time, Kanshiram was using the concept of Bahujan with a SC, ST, OBC combination as majority. He was also including minorities and so on. And the media was using the term Dalit to tell about the untouchables. Whereas in this book, I used a collective term called Dalit Bahujan to tell about the historically oppressed communities as suppressed, oppressed, and exploited majority. And the upper castes were, in my book, Brahmins, Banyas, Kayasthas, Khatris, Kshatriyas. And there is a new chapter in this book called the Neo-Kshatriyas, in which at that time I put the Jats, Gujars, Patels, Reddis, Kammas, who were Shudras, who were not in the reservation. So this book has several chapters. It has a chapter on childhood formations, how the childhood is formed in the productive communities, and how every child is taught to interact with the nature, involve in cattle rearing or food producing or child management at home, and how the touchability untouchability relations were much less in the productive fields, and how similarly the childhood formations among the Brahmins and Banyas or Kayasthas and Khatris. I mainly examined Brahmins and Banyas, how their children don't interact with nature, they are not allowed even the food cultural training, that we are mostly fed with every food item available, the meats and fish and vegetables, whereas they are mostly brought up as vegetarians. Then I move on to the differences in marriage, market, and social relations. I have shown in graphic narration how the Dalit Bahujan marriage system had nothing to do with the Dvija marriage system. The kind of ritualism, the kind of practices, the kind of man-woman relations that were supposed to be set up in the marriage, they were totally different, because the working people, wife and husband, have to work in the field, and they have to coordinate at home, and then child upbringing is a process of natural engagement with production. Whereas here, they are completely set away from natural productions and productive systems, and then children by and large are not aware of the struggles with nature. The plant, the animals, the tree, and then the good and bad of natural. Then I go on to a chapter called The Emergence of Neo-Kshatriyas and the Reorganization of Power Relations. Quite interestingly, at that time, take for example the Reddys, Kammas, Velamas of Telangana, Andhra Pradesh, and the Jats, Gujars, Patels, mainly Jats, Patels and Marathas, and so on in the North India. They were against reservations. They were against the Mandal Commission. And they had landed estates, some of them, and they were not owning the Shudra history. Therefore, I thought that they were emerging as Neo-Kshatriyas, as the Kshatriya community was very small, and then they thought they would step into the shoes of the classical Kshatriyas. But my assumption of them has gone wrong. Now they are marginalized in the BJP, RSS central systems, and with the recent farmers' struggle, who are basically Shudras, and that too the upper layer of Shudras, Jats and others. So it has come out very clearly that their assumption when I wrote Why I Am Not a Hindu was one, that they thought that they would become Kshatriyas, but the same Hindutva network and the secular Brahmanism of Congress variety also did not allow them. Then I go on to contemporary Hinduism. See, Hinduism has a historical phase, the writing of books phase, and then the temple system phase. And what was contemporary at that time when I was writing, even now? So I looked at how the Shudras and Dalits, the OBCs, Adivasis, what kind of temple relation they have, how they are not allowed to become priest, and how the priest language is not understood by the productive mass. So as a result, the spiritual knowledge and the production knowledge are completely in two compartments. So they had no meeting point, they had no human relations. The priest never sits in any Shudra house or Dalit house and eats their food and then touches them and so on and so forth. So the whole range of life was described. In the market was happening. How small shops, at one stage there were Brahmin Bhojan coffee hotels, and then the Vaishyas were also vegetarians, and then their close interrelationship, and then their opposition to the people's food, who were producing food and needed more and more protein energy by eating meats, were condemning as Shudras and Mlecchas. So all that was brought in. Now, if that is the Hindu structure, how can they define the whole Shudra, Dalit, Adivasi masses as Hindu, along with the Brahmin, Banya, Kayastha, Khatris, who have a different cultural, spiritual and social system? Then I looked at Hindu gods and the Shudra, Dalit, Adivasi spiritual system, and the Shudra, Dalit, Adivasi gods and goddesses and their relationship, because the gods and goddesses are not the same. The gods and goddesses that came from the production fields, for example, Pochama in under the village temples, or Birappa, or Potaraju, or Kattamaisamma, or Ailoni Mallana, Komarelli Mallana, all these gods I examined, how they were essentially became, they are gods who looked after sheep, cattle, goat, and agricultural production operations, or irrigation technology built. Kattamaisamma, for example. Pochamma was a medical practitioner who taught people that neem is a medicinal plant and turmeric is a medicinal plant, and so on. So whereas the gods and goddesses that came from the Vedic and Ramayana Mahabharata texts had caste names, and they were located in the castes, either Kshatriyas or Brahminic locations, and the weapons that they had in hands. So I looked at, what is this relationship? Here are the production gods and goddesses. There are gods and goddesses who have weapons in their hands, and production relations are not at all shown in their narrations, in their histories, in their. So how this vast gap has come in between, and it is a graphic narration, and it now globally is re-examining, global academics in many universities, whether it is Oxford, Harvard, Cambridge, or so on. They are studying India through my book, that how these different spiritual cultures, without a common abstract God idea, can operate. How does it work for such a long time, for about 3,000 years, is now being examined. And then there is a chapter called The Hindu Death and Our Death. So there is also a difference in treating the dead body in productive communities and in the Dvija communities. The whole process of handling dead body up to burning the bodies, mostly in many productive communities, dead bodies are buried because their body consists of 4 elements: soil, heat, air, and water. And once they are buried, the 4 natural elements that human body has will go back again to earth, and heat, water, and so on. So there are huge practices, and the post-death ceremonies, and the kind of weeping, the kind of recalling the ancestors. I've shown the differences between the Dvijas, those who have the thread across their body, and those who produce food. So the last chapter is a phenomenal experiment. Dalitization, not Hinduization. Here I studied the Dalit community's survival without private property, and with a culture of distribution of the daily wages, the daily resources, the food that they acquire. It is not any private property of any family, but the whole family distributes. And the man-woman relations, since both of them work, they have quarrels, they have loving relations, they have children's procreation and upbringing. So that is entirely different even from the Shudras. So I have shown how a Dalit Vada is a Indian model of socialist distribution and labor as life. Here is a community which lives leisure as life. They never work for producing. Here is a Dalit community which always depends on only labor. There is no private property. So how this community and their man-woman relations, where there is democratic essence in that relationship. Man and woman work, man and woman drink some toddy or liquor, whatever they have. So there is no major oppressor and oppressed man-woman relationship there. There could be wife beating, but there could be husband beating as well. So I looked at all that in that chapter and suggested that not Hinduization that would develop India. Now we can see after RSS BJP coming to power and ruling India almost 13 years now, 5 years earlier and 7 years now, that their developmental model is handing over money to monopoly houses, even the agriculture, privatizing everything. They don't believe in equal distribution or even unequal distribution of wealth and resources of nation. Because in Brahmanism's history, sharing and distribution is not there. So I have shown in this. And the last afterword is about how this book was received, critiqued by Brahmin scholars, by Dalit Bahujan scholars, and women and men within the Brahmin families, how they looked at this book differently. It is a constantly bestseller now. And after the Penguin started printing it, by then I changed my name into Kancha Ailaiah Shepherd, and all my books are now, even the old books are printed with the name Kancha Ailaiah Shepherd. Now I want Indians to read every book. We should not ask for banning books, whatever the book. So, as Supreme Court said, when rejecting the ban proposal of my another book, Post-Hindu India, that those who don't want to read the books, they need not read. But it is the Shudras, the Dalits, the Adivasis, even Reddis, Kammas, Jats, Gujars, Patels, never read seriously the Indian history in social science. Their children must become scholars, philosophers. Then only we can abolish untouchability, we can abolish caste inequalities, and we can resolve this problem of Hindutva, which is going to almost take back the Indian civilization to the medieval times. Thank you. I wish all of you will read this book to start with.